this edition of the Litchfield County Sports Program. I'm your host, Tim Gaffney, and we've got a tremendous show on deck for you tonight. We want to thank the fine folks here at Cable 5 for taking care of us tonight. To my right, or your left on TV, or somewhere in the middle, is Mr. Patrick Tissue, who I have not seen in a while.
It's good to be back. A long time.
How are you?
Good, good.
Way on the other side, Mr. Rick Wilson. How are you, sir?
Good. My last ode to summer right here.
We had the compliment to shorts. We were going there, you know.
So, and while we're on that, just a quick, this is our last summer show, so to speak.
It is.
And, so all the kids we covered in high school last year are heading off to college this weekend.
Good.
All the returning high school kids are coming back, and they're getting their fall seasons ready. So we just wish all of them luck, and in both college and high school.
There's some tears on both sides, both from the parents and from the kids.
Oh, I'm sure. Some empty households, and yeah.
I was at the Tim Continent Golf Tournament on Saturday, and Rick and I did a show, and Connor Finn's father, Pat, was there, and he's now playing at Union College, and he kind of wishes he was back in high school going through the drills as opposed to the drills that he's going through right now at Union High School. So it's a different world. But I regress, because we are here tonight to talk to a very special guest, a young man who we were fortunate enough to cover at the University of Connecticut. Mr. Casey Cochran has been nice enough to come all the way down from Westerly, played golf today, came to Litchfield. I'm saying serious street cred. Evening, sir. Thanks for coming down.
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You know, it was a pleasure to cover you. You know, it wasn't as long a time as you would have wanted it to be, but you are on a pretty special mission right now when it comes to trying to spread, word on concussions. And the first question I want to ask you is, you put up a brilliant piece on Derek Jeter's Players Tribute. How did that come about?
You know, I'd never really written in my life, and whether it was papers for school or, I was never really a fan, and I found that writing was a way to express myself and get some of those emotions out and some of those experiences. So one day I just sat down and I started writing, and I sent it out to the Players Tribune and reached out to them, and they gladly accepted it. And a couple months down the road, they put it out, and it was just an amazing experience to get on that site, because it is an amazing site, and they put out some fantastic content.
And, the way that you kind of described that play, which I remember to this day because we were there, how it was, remind me, it was against BYU,
yes.
Right? First quarter.
Yep.
Fourth quarter.
Yeah,
We
right,
played most of the game. And, kind of take folks through. But what we're really talking about tonight is concussions and why Casey had to retire from football, and the message that he's trying to get out there to as many young kids and parents as possible. But take us through that last play, as you so eloquently did in the Players Tribune.
Absolutely. So, I start the article as me in the game, on that last play, unknowingly that being my last play. So, I catch the snap, I'm running to my left, I quickly realize that all my options are covered, and the defense is closing in around me, and as that thought's happening, I'm getting hit from the backside, and on the way to the ground I try to brace myself, and my weight crumples underneath me, and my head hit the ground with a big whip, and as most of my concussions, I blacked out and woke up and realized where I was, and just immediate confusion and the headache and the emotion that comes with that. And then I ran off the field, and I turned to my running back who was on my left, and I said, "What happened?" But it didn't come out in English at first, and I mustered out some English and asked him what happened, got to the sideline, and played it off for a while, like most of the other ones that I had in college and high school. And about a week later, I was done with football. It was cool to show people what it's like to be in a play, mm-hmm. and I probably wrote a page and a half about that play, and it only really elapsed for 20-30 seconds.
Casey, what was the process when you decided that was going to be your last play? Because we were talking before we went on the air, you had had previous concussions.
Absolutely. That ended up being my 13th concussion throughout my career. So at one point I knew that it was going to end. I knew the career was going to end, regardless of concussions or not, but it seemed like the more I accumulated, the sooner my career was going to end. So, it wasn't publicly known. Not many people knew about it. I hid it from a lot of people, but inside I knew that, I had to play like it was going to be my last play all the time, and that ended up being my last play. basically after I didn't really tell many people I hit it for my family and friends and teammates and coaches. By the end of that weekend, if we played on a Friday, that Monday I had to say something because of how bad I was feeling.
Now, your dad's well known in football circles in Connecticut. Did he see this? Did he know this coming? He sensed where you were coming from and how serious this was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my mom and my dad were the people that knew the most about how many I had accumulated up to that point, and we were all at a consensus that this was probably going to have to be it if I was feeling that way.
And what was that last week like? I remember when we found out, it came out of nowhere to us. We got a press release. It wasn't like he was injured right after the game. We knew it. We're just waiting for the injury reports to come out. It was out of nowhere. You're done. You're not just injured. You're not going to just miss a couple of weeks. It's over.
Yeah.
So what was that week like?
It was strange, and part of it was due to the fact that I hit it. I hit it at first, like most people do, like I did for so long. So, I kind of hit the trainers as a surprise when I told them at first. So I think that next week we were playing Stony Brook, and I was just out with an upper body injury, and I think that was a release for that week. And then come the very next week, you guys get the press release, and I'm sitting in front of a lot of reporters and starting to tell my story. But it happened very quickly.
And how difficult was it? Because at the end of the season before, you'd taken over the starting job, and you played really well. It wasn't easy to get to that point for you. You finally got the reins. You were playing well. It's kind of a forgotten time at UConn, because that was right after Pasqualoni got fired. TJ Weist comes in. Lost a couple of games, you take over, and you guys had a really strong end to that season, so there's a lot of hope going into that year. How hard was it for the timing of your career for it to happen?
It was tough, but I think it started before then. When I got into college, I realized that this is a crazy game, this is a hard game to play at a D1 level. So I got to a point in my redshirt season where I realized that, hey, it's a blessing to be here. I feel so lucky to be on this team and be able to play at this level, and that's part of the reason why I did so well at the end of that 2013 season, was because I was playing just to play finally. There was a lot of pressure before, and there was a lot of pressure for me to go to the state school and to perform at a high level at the state school. So, those last 3 games that we won in 2013, I was just having fun, and that's a cool place to play at. So by the end of that season, I knew that I played, basically as high as I could play, and I could have gotten better if I would have kept playing, but I was happy with where my career was at that point.
Which is pretty, if you think, 2-time Gatorade Player of the Year and everything else, that's got to be a hard thing to let go of, even though you've got the practicality, and it is a scary thing happening, but something you've been doing since you were a little kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born into football, and I show people the picture. I have a picture of me in a crib with a football. I wouldn't go to summer camps. I would be with my dad for football camp, and I would be with him throughout the summer, filling out weightlifting cards or setting up the pads for practice. So that's all I knew.
Yeah.
So stepping away from football wasn't just stepping off into the abyss. It was me stepping into life,
right.
And learning who I was outside of football, and finding other things. And I play golf now. I play guitar. I meditate. I do yoga. I do so many things, and every day I realize that there's more outside of sports.
When did you get your first concussion?
My first concussion was in 6th grade, so I was 11 years old.
What was it like, or what do you, more just a headache thing, or?
Yeah, it was, I was playing defensive line back then. I was a chubby little guy. I didn't play quarterback till 7th grade. And I was playing defensive line. Jonathan Esposito, who ended up playing at Princeton, he played at Conard, and he was a running back then. He looked like he was 7'2", and everyone was afraid of him. So I thought I'd go take him on, and we met head to head, and we both fell backwards. And when I hit the ground, I was blacked out. I came to, and immediately, I didn't know where I was and what just happened, and it was a before and after moment. I'd never been hit in the head before like that, and I immediately ran off the sideline, and my dad said that I probably had a concussion, and that was my first taste of it. And I think a couple of days later we watched the film of me hitting him, and my whole team was so excited that I got to hit him like that, and I felt bad for him. I was wondering if he felt like I did.
Right.
And that was the first taste I ever had of concussions and those feelings, and And I didn't like that. I didn't like that we celebrated kids getting hurt and at a very young age. So I started to look at the sport and with a keen eye.
When you go to talk about hiding concussions, what's the bigger reason? Is it fear of losing your position or fear of letting your team down?
There's so many factors that go into play when kids hide what they have. I think part of it is there's this weird unwritten rule in the game that you're supposed to tough out injuries. And there's a difference in being tough and fighting through pain. You know, there's pain that we all have every day, whether it's in life or in sports. But there's also injury, and brain injury is the most severe injury that you can possibly have. And we need to start telling kids that that's not something you can.
More so in football, because of the macho image that football has. This idea that.
No matter
I can't tell you I'm hurt. I don't want to tell you ankle's killing me. In this case, something even more serious with the head. But more, and you think more so in football? I mean, there's obviously because of the contact, probably more instances of concussions. But
absolutely, I think it's the hardest game to play. I think it's the best game in the world, and it could be the most dangerous game in the world. And along with that toughness that we talk about, come a lot of ugly secrets of the game and a lot of things that people carry with them for the rest of their lives because of the injuries that they hide.
You know, and we were talking before we went on the air about how we used to have all those YouTube videos of the best and biggest hits. Sports Center used to have them and all the rest, and we all celebrated that violent, hitting in the rest of it. And I think that's where a lot of that, kind of grew in. And yeah, you have to do that. I mean, how many times did you see you got the whole team around you, one-on-one in the middle, and it's just take the other guy out. I think nowadays maybe it's more a little side, a little chest or something, but before it used to just be helmet to helmet.
Absolutely.
Just knock them out. Just wanted to read apart from what you put on the Players Tribune about the 13 concussions. I probably should have stopped playing football in 8th grade after my 3rd concussion, but I was afraid to speak up, afraid of disappointing people who had invested in my career, afraid of who was I without football. I wish I hadn't hit the 3 concussions I had in 1 week during my junior year of high school, but I was afraid that college recruiters would find out. I definitely should have said something after smacking my head on the turf while playing SMU during my first collegiate start, but again I was afraid of what was beyond the familiar realm of the gridiron, afraid of the unknown. And after reading that entire article, yeah, you can write for us anytime you want, young man, because you found a nice release, and I think that now you're kind of on a mission. And tell people about what your mission is. What are you looking to get out there?
Well, what I realized when I stopped playing was that my experiences are in a vacuum, and I'm not the only person who's gone through this. A lot of what happens in sports is that people get isolated when they stop playing. People get isolated when they get injured. And I realized that there are 6 million kids who played youth football last year, and I realized how many kids are getting concussions when you really look at it. And there's a lot to be done, and I want to be part of that process to help with the healing and help with change, because there's a lot of change that needs to be had, and mainly what we need to realize is that concussions are the biggest injury that you can have. And when you look at the scale of how many people are getting hit in the head in sports in America, it's a pressing issue, and we need to offer help. We need to offer knowledge and education to coaches, players, parents, and medical staffs around the country.
If you had to pick a first step, is it tackle football at an older age? Where do you think it should begin?
I think when you look at the research that's out so far is we realize that the head blows that younger kids take are more devastating because of their body composition. Their heads are big where their bodies are small. So, the forces that they do take to their head are sometimes harder than some NFL hits, just based on size and scale. We also realize that when kids are growing up, they're trying to figure out the world. So when you throw in a concussion, it makes it so much harder to figure out and deal with life and stress and school and everything. So when you start at a young age, you're more susceptible for it. And when you have a concussion, you're more susceptible to have more. So I think one step is to limit the amount of contact that young kids have. So, taking those pads off at a younger age, starting them in high school, and then starting with techniques that are safe, tackling techniques, limiting hits in practice, where a majority of concussions happen, especially for linemen, whether it's offense or defensive line. There are a multitude of steps, and we can continue to talk on them, but the biggest thing is when you look at that number, 6 million youth football players, there is a big number of head trauma there.
Do you see it as a correctable problem, or at least one that we can pull back from that a little bit? Will you let your kid play?
Right now I wouldn't. If I had a kid today and it was getting time to fall and signing up for football, I don't know if I would sign up my son or daughter for football, just because I know how tough it was on me to take those head hits at 11 years old at such a young age, and then try to figure out what's going on. Why is my head hurt? Why do I feel down today? And I don't want my kids to feel that pressure to hide that like I did, and I would be the first person to tell them that they shouldn't, but it happens. We try to hide what we're going through a lot.
And the ugly side is there's billions of dollars on the line with football, college football and NFL. In the NFL, you see the heads-up program. Do you think they're really hearts are into it, or is it just trying to be a public smokescreen just to show everybody, hey, we're trying to look out for everybody, but at the same time, they don't want to lose $1 of those billions?
Of course, and I grew up with the heads-up program. That was the gold standard for football, and growing up, I thought that I was okay. Okay, we have a heads-up program. They're saying we're okay. The whole time, they knew that we weren't. There was research out. There were plenty of people in the scientific community pointing to the devastation of head trauma. That's one huge step that we need to take in saying that, hey, we need to look at outside sources, not just the NFL. They are the governing body, and they tell us how to play the game, if we are safe or not. They come up with rules to protect people, but based on what we know now, they have used money over safety a lot of times.
I think in part of what came out, we were talking before about the movie Concussion, that Will Smith portrayed. One of the things that stunned me is of any mammal on the planet, we're the only one whose brain is not wrapped in anything. Our brain is just floating around. Every other has something protecting its brain. So every time a kid hits his head, your brain is moving backwards. And like you're saying, when they're young, it's not developed yet. So that's where it gets hurt even more. I mean, when they put the numbers up, Mike Webster was, one of the first ones that they went through. The amount of times that he was hit in the head, 65,000 or something like that, over time. I mean, it was just absolutely stunning. And we talked before, and I lost a lot of respect for the NFL too. They tried to discredit the guy. They tried to run him out off the planet. I mean, he came up with, and I have to pronounce this because I practiced today because it's a ridiculous name. See, I'm thinking if you had head trauma, you're not going to be able to pronounce this name. So we just say headaches, but chronic traumatic enteropathy. No.
CTE.
Wait, CTE. Encephalopathy. Yeah. English language. But, the fact that, that doctor just would not give up, and actually he was a coroner, right? He was one that first, looked at Mike Webster, and he couldn't figure out why a man in his 50s had gone mad. The CAT scan wouldn't show anything, the MRI wouldn't say anything, he had to go through. And the only way you could find out about this was when someone died. Like usually everything else we do in medicine, we figure out before, somebody goes. And I think that the painstaking process that they went through to make sure that nobody knew about this, you know what I mean? It took me off. Because, I'm sitting next to a young man who, your head hurts a lot, probably. Your head probably still hurts occasionally now, and you've talked a little bit about how sometimes your memory might not be, where you want it to be, and you grew up, in this environment. So,
has the NFL, has anyone they've tested after they've passed away, have they ever found someone who didn't have it since this has come out?
So 79 out of 81.
It's just the percentage is staggering.
Right, it's not, especially the ones that would have in the beginning I mean, Webster, I think he had a heart attack, but in the movie they were portraying it that he was pulling out his own teeth and then putting them back in with crazy glue and using a cattle prod on himself. And then I think one of the telling moments of the movie was when it was one of the Players Association's guy, and I forget what his name was. You might remember, but Dorsey? No. He was at the Players Association, and he discredited his doctor to pieces until he started suffering from it himself.
Yes. Tony Dorsett has come out, and I think with memory issues. I don't think anything to the extent of Webster at this point. But
I mean, I think that it is it's a huge issue in Torrington. Here we have the Torrington Warriors program. Mm-hmm. Torrington Middle School is absolutely jammed for practice. There's 5 or 6 different levels of what used to be Pee Wee and now is Warriors football, and that's starting from age 8 up till 13 or 14 before high school, and these folks are into this. Mm-hmm. So it's not as if Rick and I were talking about it that we thought maybe these numbers would be going away based on it. But when you talk to football people, and we got one on our staff, Rich Elliott, you know what I mean, where his 2 kids play football, and he played football. So
but the interesting is talking to some folks over in Watertown. I know a couple of years ago they said their numbers were down, and the whole concussion and what was beginning to come out was what was affecting for their midget program.
And our friend Rich, a terrific writer and stuff, is very protective of his kids,
right.
But he grew up in football.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be football, probably to an extent, if the kids end up, getting hurt. But by nature, it's not a force.
Of course.
Of course, that's the whole idea.
And one of the biggest points that a lot of people say, coaches, commentators, they like to say that players know what they're getting into when they go to play football. They know it's a tough sport. They know it's a contact sport. But like the Heads Up program, we thought we were fine. We did not know what we were getting into. There were a couple signs in our locker room about concussions when I first got into school, but they didn't tell me that I'd have devastating side effects for the rest of my life. I struggle with anxiety, depression. I have PTSD. There are a lot of things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, and they were not talked about, and they need to be talked about.
I always remember what we've got 2 schools up here that co-opted. Gilbert co-opted with Northwest Regional, and Northwest Regional was the school they co-opted with. But I can remember our friend Mike Amari telling me, these kids think they want to play, and they come out, and the first time they get their bell rung, they're gone. They don't realize to an extent when you start getting bigger and how tough it is. So, right. Sometimes on that level, I'm wondering how many of them think it's not throwing a football out in a sandlot game on a Sunday afternoon.
Right.
And how's been the reaction been to the article?
It's been great. I put my email at the bottom just so people would be able to reach out, and I got a couple hundred emails.
Sure.
From people. I got an email from a kid in the Philippines, in India,
sure.
Some rugby players in Ireland and in Great Britain. I got an email from a girl who got hit in the head with a shark fin on the ocean island.
Oh, wow.
It's been a tremendous outpouring of support and people who really did enjoy the article, and that's what I want to create as a community for people who have traumatic brain injury, who are struggling today, and who need the help and the support to keep going, because it's concussions and brain injury are hard to overcome.
Casey, let me just ask you, you've had 13 concussions. What do the doctors tell you? You worry about down the road, about the long-term repercussions of that, or this will heal itself and we'll be fine?
No, I do. So, I see a psychiatrist, a therapist.
Okay.
I do cognitive therapy, so speaking and hearing, and I do physical therapy. There are a lot of things that I'm working on today. Mainly it's been 2 years nearly 2 years since my last hit, and I still feel the effects. It's hard to get up some days. It's hard to stay motivated and to get up and go get after things like I used to. Depression is a horrible thing, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
No.
And it's one thing that's very, very slowly getting better over just this past month. So I'm very excited for it to be slowly resolving, but unfortunately I've been to 2 memorial services for hockey players this past year. Teenagers who've taken their own lives after concussions, and it's serious. We see the junior Seau's of the world. We see we see these NFL and hockey players who take their own lives, but this is something that happens, from the top down.
Sure.
And it's my life's work now. Now that I've seen these families who've been stricken by loss and seen people who struggle every day, you want to help and you want to give back.
Kudos to you, and we're very proud of you for taking this mantle, because you probably had a different one in mind when you were 8 years old, towards NFL probably, somewhere in your future. So taking this, bull by the horns and trying to see if you could make a difference. I mean, we certainly appreciate, your efforts. And like you said, you're going around, you've talked to legislators here, you've been around the country a little bit. People are interested in hearing this story even more. You came from Westerly to see us. How good is that? You know what I mean? For all over, you're here seeing response, and folks want you to come talk about it.
It's been tremendous. Whether I went to a memorial run in Pennsylvania, or I was at a golf tournament the other day in Farmington. I've been to Alabama. I've been to Austin. It's picking up more and more. I think more and more people are realizing that it's an issue and they want to be informed. There are a fraction of people that don't want to hear what's going on. A lot of whether it's coaches, and not all coaches. There are some coaches that just don't want to hear that the sport can be dangerous. And my message is, let's attack this problem head on. What people don't realize is that if we don't solve the problems now, the game will just go away. Whether it's legislation that takes it away.
That's stunning to hear, but it just might happen.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We need to realize that there is enough research out right now to treat this as the highest priority in this game and across all sports. It's not just football, it's lacrosse, it's hockey, it's everywhere. People get concussions every day. Like I said, a girl got hit with a shark fin.
Well, you're sitting here talking, and I'm thinking while he's talking, I've lost my memory 3 times in my life. And so it makes you wonder. I fell out of a tree, I hit my head on ice in my senior year in high school. A little bit, I didn't get hit by anybody, but my head hit the floor. So it really makes you wonder. But I think what you're doing is important, is what Chris Herron does. Chris Herron, Chris Herron's come to a lot of schools around here and talked about his, basketball travels to the Boston Celtics from Fall River and became a junkie, lying on the streets in Turkey. And he comes around a lot, and I think his is a great story, but I think yours is a great story and just equally important. And basically what's pretty new territory. The old falling off to drugs is not new territory, but I think what you're doing is pretty terrific.
Yeah, thank you.
Casey, do you think you have your race against time right now? Is it going to, or are you worried that maybe someone's going to die on the field that we're going to be watching it during the Super Bowl or something? Do you think we're heading towards something like that? Is it you feel like you have to hurry up and get this out in the forefront?
Well, yeah, I mean, whether it's someone dying on the field, which has happened, or we've seen people paralyzed on the field, and the game goes on. But what I want people to realize is that people after the game, players who play the game and continue on, still struggle. It's not once they have the pads off and they continue on in life. Sometimes it's too hard for them to continue on, and we're seeing that more and more. For everyone, we need to realize that a ding to the head, getting your bell rung, is a concussion. The definitions have changed. We can't let a kid who feels dizzy or has lost a little bit of memory go back out because we think he's fine, or he convinces the coach or medical staff that he's fine. If there's a question whether they did get hit in the head, let's get them out, get them the right treatment, and not push them to get back.
Part of all training for high school coaches now, right? You were in London last year, but I think all the head coaches, I think all the coaches have to do concussion training too, along with first aid, correct?
Absolutely,
yeah.
and there is legislation. There are steps to get people informed. I remember when I did take the course to coach on the high school level, I remember it being very easy. You were able to just go in, find the answers, resubmit them as many times as you wanted. I think that it needs to be extensive. I think that because we know how serious this is, we need to treat the courses and the education portion of it very
So the
seriously.
protocol needs to be a little tougher.
I would say so.
Well, specifically since, and we know this up here in the northwest corner, a lot of the smaller schools still can't afford to have a trainer at every game either, so it's, a lot of things fall in the hands of a coach sometimes.
And for the fields, the turf fields, we're starting to see that a lot more in high school. It saves money in the long run as far as maintenance and everything's concerned. Is that a difference? They play with a grass field, turf field. Is there a difference there? Do you notice that?
Yeah, I think they're still hard surfaces. You know, whether it's rubber pellets your head bounces off of or dirt. It's people. We need to realize that whether you hit heads with someone else, you hit the ground. There's so many ways that you can get hit in the head. We just need to mitigate a lot of them. You know, specifically in practice and
Sure.
in places that we really don't need to have them.
And the biggest thing is probably for the NFL salary, you know, the lifespan of an NFL player is not very long, and it doesn't matter how many millions you have, right? Because this cannot be cured by get me a better doctor, I have enough money to take care of this.
30 minutes.